A gold heart locket, my late wife's, was the last warm thing I had of her until my daughter stared me down at my own kitchen table and said, "I sold it. You'll get over it." That was the moment the floor shifted, a home turned hostile, a shove masked as a joke, a forged path to guardianship, even a title loan in my name. What followed wasn't shouting, it was paper, proof, and a choice that cut the prize out from under them. This is how a quiet man drew a hard line and took his life back. Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're watching from. And as you watch, don't just sit back, be part of the experience. If a moment grabs your attention, whether it's powerful, unexpected, or deeply moving, drop a comment with the timestamp of that scene and share your thoughts. Your reactions bring the story to life, and we love seeing which moments resonate with you the most. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a coffee or tea, settle in, and let's begin. I wake before the thin edge of sun breaks the roofs across the river and stand on the back porch with a mug warming my hands. Early autumn in Milwaukee has a clean bite to it. The maples along the Menomonee are just beginning to turn, the leaves hesitating between green and fire. Most mornings I can still hear Marion's laugh in the creak of the porch swing and talk to her in the hush that comes before the first bus sighs down the avenue. Today is her birthday. For years I have kept a small ritual. I set her heart locket in the center of the kitchen table, polish the gold with a soft cloth, and drink my coffee slowly until the metal holds a little morning light. It is not much, but it pins the day to something steady. I climb the stairs, feeling the sweetness in my knees that didn't exist in my 40s, and open the oak dresser we bought the summer the basement flooded. The top drawer smells faintly of cedar blocks and laundry soap. The velvet box is exactly where I left it, corner neatly squared to the drawer's edge, a tiny habit of a man who spent a lifetime measuring tolerances. I lift the lid, expecting that first familiar brightness. Instead, the lid opens on air. An empty cradle of cream satin, faint impression where the locket should be, as if the jewelry were a bird that stepped out of its nest and never looked back. The quiet in the room changes temperature. I feel it in my teeth. At first, I tell myself I am mistaken. I look behind the wedding photo on the dresser, under the folded handkerchiefs, in the cigar tin where I keep screws that don't match anything. I kneel to check the space behind the baseboard heater and sweep a hand under the bed, catching dust that smells like old wool. Nothing. Downstairs, a laugh barks out, Brett, and the television offers up a game show host speaking in neon. Kyler's headset adds a steady drone of other people's pleasure. I stand and look at the bed, the closet, the framed railroad calendar, as if the room might remember what I do not. By the time I step into the hallway, the house has resumed its borrowed rhythm. A suitcase sits by the front door with a strip of new airline tags looped through the handle. On the coffee table, a glossy postcard of a beach, Cancun, shines like a dare. Tracy moves in the kitchen with quick, competent motions I recognize from another lifetime, pan in one hand, phone in the other. For 3 years, they have called this arrangement temporary, and for 3 years, temporary has rooted like a weed between the floorboards. I set my coffee on the counter and keep my voice easy. "Tracy, have you seen your mother's locket?" She does not turn. "I sold it, Dad. We needed the money for our trip. Don't make this a whole thing." Brett grins without looking away from the TV. "Sentiment's nice, but metal is metal." Kyler glances at me over the top of his controller, lens flat eyes that slide off my face and back to the screen. Heat travels up my chest and stops, as if there is a stop sign behind my sternum. I nod, pick up the coffee again, and leave the room without a word. Upstairs, I close my door with care, the same way you close a book you intend to open again. I sit at the small desk beneath the window that looks over the river and pull the yellow notebook from the drawer. My hands are steady enough. The page takes the point of the pen with a little whisper. I write, "Marion's birthday." Box empty. Tracy says sold. I set the pen across the margin and wait for the anger to bloom the way it used to when a foreman lied about a time card or a contractor cut a corner on a safety guard. It doesn't. Instead, there is a colder feeling, a sorting feeling. I think of Marion's last winter and the nights she woke in small coughs, and how she told me once, not unkindly, "Don't let anyone turn you into a guest in your own house." I stand and cross to the dresser again, not because I expect a different result, but because the body likes to rehearse the moment a thing becomes true. The velvet box is still light as an eggshell. In its absence, I can feel the weight the locket used to have, the way it warmed to her skin, the crescent rub mark where the clasp touched the back of her neck, the brief scrape of metal against my thumb when I fastened it for her on our way out to church. Grief is a precise tool. It remembers edges. I take out my phone and search for pawn shops near me. Milwaukee has more than you'd think. The first two numbers ring into nothing. The third puts me on hold beneath a drizzle of saxophone. The fourth answers with a brisk woman who takes my description but not my hope. The fifth is on National Avenue, the kind of place that has a bell on the door and a sun-faded neon sign in the window. A man answers in a voice like slow coffee. "Novak," he says, and I describe the locket, the faint engraving that looks like ivy along the rim, the way the gold darkened from years of being loved. He lets me finish before he speaks. "I think I might know the piece," he says. "There was a tiny catch on the side." It opened. Inside was a folded scrap so small we nearly missed it. The pen is back in my hand without my telling it to be. "What did it say?" I ask, and hear my own voice the way you hear a voice on a recording, familiar and slightly wrong. "Lakeview Credit Union," he says, "a box number, 2 words, Maple Project. I kept the paper safe. If it's yours, you can come by. We can make it right." I thank him and end the call. The room is quiet except for the furnace knocking once, like an old friend asking if I'm still here. I set the phone down and pick up the velvet box again, ridiculous as that is, and feel its lightness for what it is, a marker, not an absence. Downstairs, a suitcase zipper saws the air and someone laughs at a joke I can't hear. I look out the window at the river sliding past, patient as ever, and I understand that what just happened is not a theft of metal, but a declaration of borders. I pick up my keys, slip the notebook into my jacket pocket, and touch the spot on my chest where, for so many years, my fingers brushed the back of Marion's necklace when I hugged her goodbye. "I hear you," I say, not loudly. "I hear you." Then I head for the stairs. The house settled around me like a coat that no longer fit. I could feel their mourning, pans hitting the burner, the synthetic laughter of a talk show, Kyler's game voice bleeding through a headset, pressing against my door as if to remind me who was loudest. I set the velvet box on my desk and photographed it with the time and date stamp visible on my phone. It felt clinical, almost unfeeling, but that was the point. When your heart wants to rush, you hand the wheel to your habits. I wrote the same timestamp into my yellow notebook and underlined it twice. Then I opened the browser and searched for pawn shops within 20 miles. Milwaukee returned more names than I expected, small storefronts I'd driven past without ever seeing. I called the first on Mitchell Street and listened to 3 minutes of saxophone before the line clicked dead. The next one took my description, heart locket, faint ivy engraving, darkened gold from skin, and told me kindly but firmly, "No record, sir." A third place said to try again after lunch. I made notes after each call the way you record voltages along a faulty circuit, not because the numbers themselves matter, but because the act of measuring steadies your hand. Downstairs, I heard Tracy laugh about package deals in Cancun and somebody say the word all-inclusive with a reverence usually reserved for church. The fifth number was on National Avenue, a shop with a name I recognized from a neon sign I'd seen blinking near a bakery that made decent potski in February. A man answered, voice unhurried. "Novak," he said. I took a breath and described what I was looking for. heart-shaped locket, tiny seam along one edge, chain repaired once years back with a stronger clasp. I tried to keep sentiment out of it and failed a little. He let me finish. "I think I might have your piece," he said. "There was a small catch you wouldn't notice unless you were looking." We opened it. Inside was a folded scrap, very small. We kept it aside. "What did it say?" I asked. "Lakeview Credit Union," he replied. "A box number and 2 words, Maple Project. If it's yours, come by. We'll sort it out." My pen moved before I did. I wrote the words exactly as he said them and boxed them with a heavy pencil line. Lakeview CU Box 7721, Maple Project. "Please hold it," I said. "I'll be there shortly." He gave me the hours, and I thanked him. The whole exchange lasted less than 2 minutes, but when I set the phone down, the room looked different, as if someone had turned a lamp I didn't know existed to the lowest setting. A folded scrap inside the locket, Marion's hands, quick and neat, came to me so clearly I could see the half-moons of flowers she used to wear on her knuckles at Thanksgiving. I listened outside my door for a beat, measuring the household like you measure a crossing signal in the snow. The rhythm tells you when to move. Tracy was reading off itinerary items, snorkel, cenote, tacos, with a bright hunger. Brett was explaining resort bracelets as if he'd invented them. Kyler punched out some canned victory line to a stranger on the internet. A suitcase zipper rasped. I slid the notebook into my jacket pocket, then took the small birthday card I'd written for Marion and tucked it in behind the notes. I had planned to set the card beside the locket at breakfast. Now I wanted it with me, like a promise I could keep. Before I left, I took one more photograph. The dresser drawer open, the velvet box leveled in the frame, the empty scoop of satin. I wrote the file name into my notebook and drew an arrow to the words Maple Project. It felt almost ridiculous cataloging my own heartbreak like evidence, but evidence has one job: refusing to be argued with. I checked for my wallet, keys, reading glasses, and turned my phone to vibrate so I wouldn't hear the house calling me back. When I opened my door, the hallway was filled with a sour blend of hairspray and bacon. The suitcase leaned against the entry table like a guest already halfway out the door, a passport tucked brazenly beside it, open to the photo page. I closed my fist to keep from straightening the passport and kept walking. In the kitchen, I slid past the island without slowing. "Out for a bit," I said, neutral as a weather report. Brett tipped an invisible hat toward the television. Tracy asked something about car insurance, and I let it dissolve into the sound of the morning news. At the door, I hesitated only long enough to look at the little row of ceramic cranes Marion used to hang on small nails. One of the nails was empty. I filed that picture away too, not because it would help, but because remembering is a way of not yielding. The outside air met me like a clean blade. Along the river, a low breeze lifted the early leaves and floated the smell of damp earth up to the porch. The Ford started on the first try, old engine catching like a throat cleared before a truth. As I backed out, I saw our living room in reflection, the television's blue, the hunched figure on the couch, the sweep of an arm. I turned my eyes to the street. For half a block, I drove without the radio, letting the city assemble itself. The clack of a skateboard on the sidewalk, a bus sighing as it knelt, a far train horn dragging its long vowel through the morning. Somewhere west, a crossing gate dropped. I imagined the red lights pulsing and felt my own pulse answer. At the first red light, I touched the notebook in my jacket to make sure it was still there. "Maple Project," I said under my breath, testing the shape of the words. They felt like something Marion would choose, plain on the surface, meaningful only if you knew where to press. By the time the light changed, my hands had settled on the wheel the way they used to when I faced a long grade and a heavy load, steady in, steady out. I didn't know why she'd hidden a message or what waited behind a box number at a credit union. I only knew this was no longer about a pretty thing on a chain. It was about a line, and for the first time in a long time, I could feel exactly where to draw it. National Avenue carried the kind of morning only old commercial streets know. Bakery sweet, metal bright, a delivery truck idling with its hood up like a yawn. The pawnshop door rang a tired bell when I pushed it, and a warm smell of brass polish and carpet dust met me halfway. Glass cases ran the length of the wall, each sprinkled with small salvations. Class rings no longer claimed, watches that had outlived the wrists that wore them, cameras that once believed every moment deserved a lens. A man in his 50s looked up from a ledger with the patience of someone who refuses to hurry a single thing. "Novak," he said by way of greeting. I introduced myself and described the locket again, careful on the details, heart shape, faint ivy-like engraving, chain repaired once with a stronger clasp. He nodded, set the ledger aside, and disappeared through a beaded doorway. When he came back, he laid a small folded cloth on the glass and unrolled it as if presenting a relic. Marion's heart lay there, its familiar oval softened by years, the surface bright where a collarbone would polish it, and darker in the hollows time couldn't reach. I tried not to reach for it the way a man reaches for a hand across a crowd. "There was something inside," he said. Using a pair of jeweler's tweezers, he tapped a nearly invisible catch along the side. The locket clicked open with a sound only I would recognize, like the faint ping of a cooling rail. Novak placed a tiny paper square beside it, folded as meticulously as a pharmacy dose. "Found this when we cleaned it. I kept it separate in case the buyer didn't know. Lakeview Credit Union," I read, "Box 7721, ask for Maple Project." My name was nowhere on the scrap, but everything else wore Marion's neatness, her preference for simple words that signaled depths only once you'd earned them. I swallowed, and my voice returned. She would have wanted me to have this back. He studied my face and then the locket and nodded as if answering a question I hadn't asked. "I paid the seller $900, he said. "Given the work on the piece, the fair price is higher." "I'll pay $14, I said, already taking out my wallet. We counted bills on the velvet like gamblers who hated luck. He wrote up a receipt. I photographed it and the locket, then signed my name with a steadier hand than I expected. The moment the chain slid into my palm, my spine loosened a fraction, as if a guitar string tuned down from a pitch too tight to hold. Outside, the air had sharpened. I sat in the car, pressed the tiny catch with my thumbnail, and opened the locket once just to hear that small affirmative sound. The paper fit back inside like a lung into ribs. I closed it, slipped the locket into my shirt pocket, and drove to Lakeview Credit Union with the particular awareness of a man carrying something both worthless to the world and priceless to himself. Lakeview's lobby was all glass and light, hushed voices and carpet thick enough to hush them further. A woman with a name badge that read ELLIE listened to my request without blinking. I produced my ID, my marriage certificate, and Marion's death certificate in a sequence that felt like reciting a creed I hadn't known I'd memorized. Ellie typed, scrolled, pursed her lips, and then softened. "The box was opened in 2017, she said, last accessed in 2020. She glanced up as if measuring the weight of those dates. "We can take you to a privacy room." The vault room smelled faintly of machine oil and cold air. Ellie used her key to release a long metal box from a hive of identical faces, set it on a table in a narrow room, and left me with a kind nod that did not spill into pity. For a minute, I only rested my hands on the lid the way you lay your palms on a family Bible before your name is written in it. Then I opened it. Inside sat a flash drive labeled in Marion's square hand, Maple. A tidy stack of cash wrapped in rubber bands, and a letter tied with a blue ribbon I recognized from the drawer where she kept Christmas paper. I didn't touch the money first. The letter peeled open with the crisp sound of good stationery. Marion's voice rose up in that room as clearly as if someone had opened a window onto June. She wrote that she had worried, not theatrically but practically, about how easily Tracy turned wants into needs and then needs into obligations for other people. She told me she had begun setting aside small bills from overtime shifts and holiday pay, a little escape fund in case grief made me softer than I could afford to be. She asked me to do 3 things when I felt the warning lights: write everything down, collect evidence without apology, and call an elder law attorney named Aubrey Lane, whom she'd spoken with when the first doubts took root. "You will want to forgive first," she wrote. "Forgive later." Document now. I set the letter on the table and let my hands cup the air. I thought of 100 small moments when I could have asked harder questions, and of Marion noticing and choosing not to scold the man she married, but to prepare him. The stack of cash counted to 18,000 with the efficient weight of numbers that don't blink. I did not put any of it in my wallet. The flash drive felt almost weightless. I turned it over to see if the label hid more instructions. On its side, in her faint pencil, she'd written, "Call saved." I pictured her at the kitchen table, phone pressed to her ear, speaking to a stranger named Lane about how to protect me from the kind of love that forgets respect. I retied the ribbon and slid the letter into my shirt pocket over my heart. The money went back in, tidy as I found it. The flash drive went into the inner pocket of my jacket. I rang the small bell by the door. Ellie returned with the same precise kindness. "All set?" she asked. "All set," I said. She printed a slip verifying access. I photographed that too and wrote the time into my notebook. My handwriting looked like my father's, suddenly, square, slower, determined not to lie. Outside, the day had brightened into a harder blue. Buses sighed. Somewhere a train put its horn into the wind and held it, the note bending at the end like a promise changing shape. In the car, I opened the notebook and drew 3 short columns the way I used to sketch triage plans on a maintenance pad. Under the first, I wrote, "Legal, call Aubrey Lane, draft residency terms, serve properly." Under the second, financial, lock down accounts, replace passwords, kill old authorizations. Under the third, proof, photos, bills, time log, recordings within the law. I boxed the words Maple Project at the top like a project code and felt for the first time in months equal to my own life. When I started the engine, the locket shifted against my chest as if to agree. I touched it once and let my hand fall. The house waited upriver with its false laughter and its bright brochure words. I would walk back in carrying more than a chain and a folded scrap. I would walk back in with a plan Marion started and I would finish. By the time I eased back into the driveway, the light had thinned into that metallic hour when the Menominee looks like a strip of solder. I carried the locket in my shirt pocket and the yellow notebook under my arm. Before I turned the knob, I made myself breathe once, long and even, the way I used to before stepping into a noisy shop floor. I wasn't coming home to argue, I was coming home to measure. The living room met me with its new geometry. Coffee table nudged aside to accommodate a ring light, cords veining the rug toward a tangle of power strips. Kyler's gaming chair planted where Marion's reading lamp used to stand. I set my phone to silent, opened the camera, and began. Wide shot, room as it is. Detail, the light fixture dangling from a makeshift clamp on the bookshelf. Footprints on the arm of the couch, a smear of craft glue on the oak end table. A half-eaten bowl of cereal balanced on the speaker Marion bought with her first bonus. I shot everything with the timestamp visible, then noted each file name in my notebook like coordinates. The kitchen was a map of absence. I laid yesterday's grocery receipt beside the milk and eggs it had paid for and photographed them together, then the utility bills on the corkboard, electric, gas, internet, my name on every letterhead, due date circled in my handwriting, no other handwriting anywhere. The refrigerator door creaked under the weight of their magnets, ticket stubs to shows I hadn't attended, schedules I hadn't agreed to, a resort postcard the color of toothpaste. I opened the junk drawer to find 3 unopened envelopes addressed to me, one torn at the corner. I didn't touch it. I photographed the envelope as it sat, the number under the barcode, the tear angle, the way it had been pushed beneath a wad of takeout menus. The hallway bathroom smelled like aftershave and aerosol. I took a single wide photo to fix the fact of it. Shelves colonized by other people's bottles, my razor jammed into a toothbrush cup already crowded. None of this was dramatic. That was the point. A ledger is built out of small squares that don't argue. On the landing, I paused to listen. The TV answered before the people did. Brett laughed at something that wasn't funny, the kind of laugh men use to tap their territory. "Place is stuck in the 80s, he said to no one in particular. Tracy, counting days aloud, brightened on the word cenote as if language itself could ferry her south. I didn't answer any of it. I climbed to my room, closed the door, and let the quiet take a seat. The lamp I'd chosen for the camera looked like it had lived in the corner for years, brass with a shade the color of nicotine. I unscrewed the shade, fed the tiny lens into place, checked the view on my phone. Couch, doorway to kitchen, a clean shot of the hallway where anyone would have to pass. I changed the default password to a string only a machinist would love, set the time to central, and ran a test by walking in and out of frame twice. The file saved as test001.mp4. I wrote the name down and drew a box around it. This wasn't spying, it was witness. At the desk, I opened my old laptop, its fan wheezing like a reluctant harmonica. A blank spreadsheet met me, a comfort I hadn't expected. Sheet 1. Loans. I scrolled through years of memory and paper until dates arranged themselves like ties on a rail. June 14th, 19. Tracy. Deposit at new place, $900. Repayment, 0.1. October 3rd, 20. Emergency dental wool, $650. Repayment, 0.10. 02/27/21. Car battery promise Friday, $220. Repayment, 0. The column of zeros was a spine. At the bottom, I let the sum calculate itself, $14,200. Sheet 2, household. I listed 12 months of electric, gas, internet, groceries, and created a column labeled Contribution TBK that never needed numbers. Beside each line item, I pasted the photo file name I'd just made and color-coded the cells by season, because sometimes order is the only salve. Sheet 3, assets. Locket. Recovered, $1,400. Receipt IMG 3421. Note inside, Lakeview CU, Box 7721 Maple Project. Link to a scan. I saved the file as maple_project_ledger.xlsx and backed it up to a thumb drive with the same steady relief as seating a bearing. A notification popped from the edge of the screen. Kyler had gone live. I clicked only long enough to catch his opening, a shrug into the camera, a sigh about people who just don't get family, a room behind him that was my room by another name. I screenshotted the frame and saved it to a folder I titled SM Proof, then closed the window before the comment stream could nick me. Evidence refuses to hate, it only points. I dialed the number from Marion's letter. A receptionist answered with a voice that sounded like she knew exactly how many women had sat crying in the hallway outside her office. I kept it short. "My name is Arthur Lane," I said. "My wife spoke with Ms. Lane a while back about protections for seniors. I have documentation. I think I need an appointment." "We can see you this week," she said. "Bring ID, any ledgers, bills, photos, receipts, the marriage certificate, and your wife's death certificate. If you have a summary, that helps." "I do," I said. "I'll have it with me." After we settled a time, I wrote the appointment into the notebook and set a reminder on my phone. Then I printed a single page labeled Case Summary, Household Status, Financial Contributions, Items Removed Without Consent, Evidence Logged, Intended Remedies, Bullet Points, clean as a parts list. From downstairs, Brett's voice arrived in my room like a smell. Place'll be Tracy's someday anyway, he said, lazy and certain, a man stretching before a race he thinks is already won. I watched the phone screen as the camera app recorded him ambling through the frame, beer can in hand, that prideful slump people get when they mistake volume for power. I marked the clip EV01 first intent.mp4 and saved it twice. Dusk drew a line across the river, the water swapping silver for ink. I laid the locket on the desk and touched the catch with my thumbnail, not to open it but to remind myself the seam existed. I labeled folders, dragged files into order, and copied the new ledger to an external drive I hadn't used since retirement. I slid Marion's letter into the inside pocket of my shirt and felt the paper sit warm against my chest. The camera indicator winked once in the corner like a star that knew its job. Before shutting the laptop, I wrote one last line in the notebook. Tomorrow, deliver residency terms. Then I stood at the window until the streetlights stitched on. The house hummed with its usual borrowed bravado. The river kept its own counsel. Between them, for the first time in a long time, I could hear mine. Morning came and clean and cold, the kind that sharpens metal in memory. I set the locket inside my shirt and cleared a corner of the dining table for paperwork. When the knock sounded, firm, businesslike, I was already standing. A woman in a navy suit held a leather portfolio and a neutral face that said she had seen every version of surprise and denial a house could hold. "Good morning," she said, "service of residency terms." I stepped aside so she could enter, her pen uncapped with a quick click. From the portfolio, she drew 3 staple pages and placed them on the table. Rent, due on the 1st. Utilities split down the middle. Conduct that allowed peace in shared spaces. 30 days to respond. She pointed to a line near the bottom. "This signature simply acknowledges receipt," she said. "It's not agreement." I nodded. We both knew what that line protected, her, me, and the paper itself. Tracy arrived in a rush of breath and perfume. She skimmed the first page and the heat rose straight to her cheekbones, a color I recognized from every Christmas she didn't get what she wanted. "This is my childhood home," she said. The woman in navy didn't flinch. "It's notice," the woman replied. "Acknowledgement only." Tracy's lips formed a refusal even before she pushed the pages away, and I saw the moment the past stopped being a leverage point and became a costume. Brett sauntered in like the camera had called him. His smile was a half-inch too wide. He read the bolded lines, then looked up as if measuring the room for a couch he planned to buy. "Lot of legalese for family," he said. The last word came out thin. "I'm putting expectations in writing," I said. My voice sounded like I was reading a tune-up spec. The woman in navy wrote the time in a blocky hand that belonged to a person who does not argue with clocks. I moved toward the kitchen for the kettle, not because I needed tea, but because the lamp camera's arc covered that threshold. Brett stepped toward me by habit, not accident. His shoulder found mine with a practiced ease that comes from knowing exactly how much force will not bruise. The cup tipped, a brown comet across the counter, and the heat licked my knuckles. I caught myself against the sink. "Careful, old man," he said, almost singing. "Accidents happen." The lamp didn't blink. I did not raise my voice. I lifted the cup, set it upright, and reached for a towel. "This is your acknowledgement," the woman said to Tracy, tone unchanged, as if the house hadn't shifted a fraction on its foundation. Tracy refused to sign, so the woman made a note, service complete regardless, and recapped her pen. The door whispered shut behind her with a professionalism that felt like mercy. Kyler had a talent for appearing when attention was cheapest. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a live notification and a frame of my own kitchen rendered in the flattened colors of a feed. A chopped clip, me turning, the cup already spilling, my mouth open in mid-word. Captioned with the kind of sentence designed to recruit sympathy. "When someone makes home hard." I watched long enough to see a wave of hearts rise like gnats and took screenshots, time, handle, the angles that lied by omission, and slid them into a folder I'd labeled SM_proof. I didn't answer. Evidence doesn't clap back. At the bank, the manager knew me by the kind of first-name courtesy reserved for gray hair and steady signatures. I asked for a glass office with a door. We sat. I slid my list across the desk. Disable every old authorization. New passwords. New questions. Two-factor on everything. Fraud alerts set to hair trigger. He printed a log, dates neatly aligned like freight cars in a yard. Attempted access last week, another just yesterday. I wrote the times into my notebook and photographed the printout. Then I initialed the change confirmations with the same deliberate hand I used to sign off safety checks. The manager thanked me for being clear. Clarity is a favor you do for the future. I drove back with the radio off. The men outside the corner bar were already arguing about the brewers in the Key of Nevermind. The house, when I opened it, had the stale smell of a party whose best hour had left. On the kitchen island, under a glossy flyer for a snorkeling tour, sat a letter from a law office addressed to me, its corner neatly torn as if it had snagged on curiosity. I photographed the envelope, the tear, the way it had been slid beneath a cutting board like someone hoping friction could stand in for time. Nothing dramatic. A second matching scuff in the same direction is how you see a pattern. Back in my room, I connected the phone and downloaded everything, the push, the cup, the live clip, the envelope, into folders labeled with dates and plain names. Then I drafted an email to the address on Marion's letterhead. Subject: Documentation, Lane Intake. I attached the files, the ledger, scans of the residency terms, and the bank's access log. I wrote 4 paragraphs that read like an engineer's failure analysis. Conditions, sequence, resulting damage, immediate mitigations. I asked for next steps and a time to talk. I hit send and taped a printed copy to the inside cover of my notebook, the way I used to tape a schematic where oil couldn't reach it. The phone rang sooner than I expected. The woman who answered at Lane's office had the tone of someone whose tool is time. I gave her the short version and she asked for exactly the pieces I had already assembled. "We'll file for a temporary restraining order today," she said, based on the video and the mail interference, "and we'll open a separate track on elder financial exploitation." She paused. "There is something else." A colleague flagged a draft guardianship petition bearing your name. It included a cognitive report with a scanned seal that doesn't match the issuing clinic's current stamp. The room shifted an inch to the left. "Forgery?" I asked. "Enough irregularities to suggest it," she said. "Prepared by Mr. Brett, at least the metadata says so. We'll include it in our filing." I wrote the words slowly. Guardianship draft, false evaluation, metadata, and boxed them. The shape my anger took was not hot. It was architectural. Plans had been made to remove me from my own decisions. The audacity steadied me more than it shook me, because it moved what had felt personal into a category I understood: attempted capture. "Thank you," I said. "Well, file what you need. I'll stay out of the way and keep recording." "Good," she said. "Do not engage. Let the evidence speak." When we hung up, I turned off the room light and stood at the window. The river was a thin blade under a sky like burnished pewter. Downstairs, a sitcom audience applauded a joke about nothing. I placed my hand over the locket and felt its small steadiness against my ribs. Tomorrow I would put the line on paper, not as a threat, but as a boundary future me could lean on. Tonight I would name the files, coil the cord, and close the notebook knowing the hinge could take another opening. Morning slid in clear and hard as glass. I woke with the same feeling I used to get before a long grade. Weight behind me, decisions ahead. The TRO filing would move through its channels. The camera would keep its patient watch. But the center of their gravity wasn't a court date or a live stream. It was the roof over their heads. If I removed the prize, I cut their motive down to size. I brewed coffee and stood at the window until the first bus sighed at the corner. Then I called a broker whose name I'd circled months back from a flyer stuck in my mailbox. Rowan Pierce. His voice came on crisp, no sugar. I said I had a house by the Menominee, clear title, in a situation that wanted efficiency more than bravado. I don't need to wring every dollar, I told him. I need to move. He took a pause the length of a pin click. I can be there at 2, he said. I spent the hours before he came doing the kind of work that looks like nothing, coiling cords into neat loops, stacking the coffee table books Marion loved into a careful column, wiping the glass of the front door so the first look felt like respect. Tracy hovered in and out of rooms with the impatience of a traveler stuck in a layover. Brett assumed the sprawl of a man whose furniture is his argument. I didn't narrate any of it. I printed the deed, the tax receipts, the certificate showing the mortgage paid in full. When my printer spat the last page, I slid the set into a plain folder and wrote in block letters, Menominee, sale. Rowan arrived on the minute, the kind of professional who shakes your hand once and lets the rest of the proof come from his tools. He mapped rooms with a laser measure that chirped softly, took photographs with a lens that made the house look like it remembered how to breathe, and asked questions with the brevity of someone who knows which answers matter. In the kitchen, he studied the cabinets without flinching at the era. We're not marketing granite, he said. We're marketing solidity. On the back porch, he faced the river and made a note. Light at 4 o'clock is your friend. We sat at the dining table. He tapped a number into his tablet, showed me recent sales, then turned the screen so I could see the arc he intended to follow. List at $329,000, he said. It invites speed without surrender. If you take a hair under that but get clean terms and a 30-day close, you win on time. I thought of bearings and heat, how sometimes running a system cooler adds years the manual never promised. Fast over full, I said. Rowan nodded once. Exactly. I slid the folder across to him, deed, tax proof, the letter certifying no liens. One more thing, I said. There's a protective order pending. He didn't blink. Then we're careful with access, he said. We schedule, we confirm in writing, and we don't apologize for boundaries. While he photographed the front elevation, Tracy's voice sharpened behind me. You can't sell my childhood, she said. The sentence sounded like a costume sewn from old photographs. I kept my back to the window. This is my house, I said, level as a workbench. She made a noise that wasn't quite a word and walked away hard enough to rattle a frame. Brett took out his phone and leaned into a door jamb like a bookmark. By late afternoon, the MLS entry was live, the description simple. River adjacent, solid bones, 2 bedrooms, workshop space, quick close preferred. A small truck with a stake rack pulled to the curb. The crew set the for sale sign with calm, tapping the posts until the board sat true. The sound reached through my ribs like a metronome. Rowan mounted a flyer box, checked the angle once more, and gave me a nod. We'll have showings by the weekend. I felt something unclench the way steel relaxes when a load is taken off. The lamp camera earned its keep an hour later when Brett sprawled across the living room at the exact moment Rowan returned to retake a photo. He didn't move when Rowan asked, polite and brief. He widened his legs and smiled at the lens. I didn't say a word. The camera didn't either. It saw, recorded, and filed the moment under a date it could reproduce without heat. The first buyers came the next morning, a pair of teachers who carried themselves like people who knew how to fix a broken desk and calm a room with their hands. They stepped around the ring light in the tangle of cords with the caution of guests who intend to say thank you no matter what. Rowan led them through. From my bedroom, I heard the woman's voice, low and pleased. It feels sturdy, she said. The man asked about winter drafts and the age of the roof. Rowan answered the way good brokers do, with facts and no embroidery. I stayed behind my door and pictured the house holding their books and quiet dinners, a future measured in lesson plans and Saturday coffee. By late afternoon, Rowan called from his car. We have an offer, he said. $327,500, conventional loan, pre-approval attached. They want a 30-day close and aren't asking for concessions. He let the sum sit. There's some interest from others, he added, but they'll want fiddly conditions and a longer runway. Accept, I said. He breathed once, a small sound of agreement. I'll send the paperwork. 5 minutes later, my email pinged. I read every line, initialed where the yellow flags told me to, signed my full name, and saved the PDF. I took a screenshot of the confirmation and slid it into the maple folder like a final washer on a bolt. After that, I wrote a short note to 3 neighbors who had always waved without asking for anything: Mr. Chin with his early tomatoes, the Pattersons with their careful hedges, Mrs. Alvarez who shoveled her sidewalk before dawn. I told them I was selling and would be out within the month. I attached one clip, 10 seconds long, of Brett's shoulder meeting mine at the edge of the kitchen. For context, I typed, I prefer facts. Replies arrived sparse and kind. Understood, Mr. Chin wrote. Wishing you steadiness, Mrs. Alvarez added. The silence from others was also a reply. Fewer shares of Kyler's curated grievance, fewer eyes on a story that did not belong to him. At the post office, I sent certified copies of the residency terms to the household, even though service had been made in person. Paper is a boundary future strangers respect. The clerk stamped, slid the receipts back to me, and asked if I needed anything else. No, I said. On the way home, I put Marion's birthday card in my pocket again and slid 2 fingers along its fold. When I moved, I would set it beside the locket in a square of afternoon sun. By week's end, a small rider appeared beneath the sign, Pending. The wind off the river clucked the plastic against the post like a gentle warning to anyone who thought time was on their side. I stood on the sidewalk and let the sound count itself. The house behind me no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a contract with dates and a closing table waiting. Somewhere in the distance, a train pulled a long note through the city. I heard it and felt my own line hold. The fight would not be in the living room anymore. It would be in filings and signatures, where noise couldn't fake weight, and time finally worked for me. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and cold coffee, a place where days are shaved into minutes. I sat with my yellow notebook while Lane's paralegal cued the video. When the judge entered, wood creaked. We stood. We sat. Lane introduced the matter without embroidery: a senior homeowner, cohabiting relatives, a pattern of intimidation, interference with mail, and a recorded shove. The screen blinked to life. There I was in my kitchen, moving for the kettle, Brett stepping into my path, his shoulder catching mine, the cup tilting, his half-laugh. Accidents happen. Stills of envelopes with torn corners followed, then a bank log of failed access attempts, dates marching like rivets. The judge leaned forward, not angry, simply exact. Facts sit well with people who practice them. Mr. Lane, she said, I've reviewed the filings. She turned to the other table. Responses? Brett's counsel spoke of family stress and misunderstandings. The judge lifted a hand. We're not adjudicating holidays, she said. We're addressing safety. Her order was clean, a temporary restraining order requiring Brett to keep a 20-foot distance from me within the residence, no harassment or interference, immediate arrest on violation. I wrote the time and case number in my notebook and accepted the copy with a steadier hand than I felt. Back home, the air changed but did not sweeten. Brett kept his 20 feet and learned to weaponize space. Doors met frames with more enthusiasm than physics required. The television climbed a notch past neighborly. Tracy drifted through rooms like a small storm, eyes bright, wallet quiet. Kyler went coy, posting lines about being pushed out by paperwork. I did not answer. I documented screenshots, timestamps, clips downloaded and named. I meant to start boxing books, but my spare truck key didn't feel right in my palm. The teeth shone like they'd been freshly cut. I opened the file drawer, laid out the title and maintenance records, checked the VEIN against the plate. On the DMV site, a new lien blinked like a hazard light. I called the hotline and held until a tired voice answered. "Can you read the borrower's name?" I asked. "Tracy Lane," the voice said, and the room went still. I wrote as he talked, lender name, date, amount, reference number, a masked email that wasn't mine. The calm in my chest felt like steel cooling. This wasn't borrowing. It was a mechanism. I scanned the title, photographed the VIN plate, and forwarded everything to Lane's office with a subject line that did its job. Urgent. Fraud on vehicle title. In the body, I listed attachments and offered to bring the truck for inspection if needed. Lane called within the hour. Her voice had that clipped softness professionals save for moments when a plan tightens. "We'll file a police report today," she said. "We'll notify the lender and demand a freeze pending investigation. Keep the vehicle secured. Don't confront anyone." "I won't," I said. "The facts are enough." The lender's fraud desk took my call. I gave the reference number, explained the forged consent, and emailed scans of the title and my signatures on other documents for comparison, plus a copy of the TRO for context. They placed a fraud hold and promised written acknowledgement. The police desk sergeant listened, generated a report, and gave me a case number. I wrote it twice in the notebook and taped the slip beside my monitor. Word traveled oddly on a street of modest houses and careful lawns. After supper, I found a folded note in my mailbox with neat block letters, "Wishing you steadiness." No name. I photographed it and tucked it behind Marion's letter, a small counterweight to months of side-eye. I turned to the work that stays done. I labeled boxes S1 through S6 and filled them with what would travel. Railroad books, ledger printouts, the USB marked maple, the shadow box I'd built for the locket wrapped in flannel. I taped a copy of the TRO inside my bedroom door, not as a dare but as a reminder. Every so often I checked the camera feed, not obsessively, just the way you glance at pressure gauges. Rowan emailed to confirm the home inspection and the buyer's timeline. Lane's assistant sent calendar holds for the next hearing on the eviction track. I made a clean list on a single page. Inspection, hearing, closing. Next to each, I drew a square I meant to earn with ink. Outside, the river kept its even talk. Later, I walked to the driveway and laid my palm on the truck's hood. The metal gave back the day slowly, a stored warmth that understood delay. In my pocket, the TRO rasped against Marion's letter. I thought about how loud I once believed strength needed to be and how wrong I had been. They had worked my voice until it cracked. Marion had taught me the better lesson. Keep your back straight, let the paper carry the weight, and never mistake silence for surrender. The morning after the courthouse quieted in my bones, I sat at my desk and made a fourth column on the one-page plan. The first three already had boxes: inspection, hearing, closing. I drew a new header with a carpenter's care: Life After. My handwriting went steady as a plumb line. I wasn't just defending ground anymore. I was laying out the next map. I started with money. At a different bank across town, I opened a new checking and a small savings, chose an email address no one knew, set alerts so that every transaction would ping me like a bell in a fog. The clerk offered me a paper folder. I photographed the account letters and slipped them into my jacket. At the post office, I rented a P.O. box and filed a mail forwarding request, the kind of small hinge that keeps a door from swinging the wrong way. I updated addresses for the doctor, the cardiology office, the insurance policy that somehow still had a number Marion had chosen years ago. Back home, I logged each change in the yellow notebook: time, confirmation code, the boring details that turn into anchors when weather comes. Lane set me on the long rails next. In her office, I read each page of the new will out loud before I signed it. Beneficiaries updated, charities named, the sentence about my daughter written in clean legal humility. She had been supported in my lifetime. We added a medical power of attorney and squared my beneficiaries on the old accounts that still mattered. Lane reviewed my case summary, added 2 questions in the margin, and circled a date for the eviction hearing. She didn't promise outcomes. She promised process and precision. I left with a folder heavier than paper should be and the ordinary relief that comes when ink is finally where it belongs. I turned my eyes to a different kind of roof. The first 55-plus place in Wauwatosa gleamed like a hotel lobby and smelled faintly of citrus and loneliness. The manager spoke in amenities and schedules that sounded like recess. The second building kept its voice lower. It had a small lobby with 2 chairs that had known books, a bulletin board with a watercolor class notice, and a quiet elevator that did not try to impress anyone. The unit on the second floor faced a line of maples and had a square of afternoon sun on the west wall big enough to hold the shadow box I was planning. I took a tape measure from my pocket and checked the corner where a workbench might fit without disturbing anyone. The leasing agent explained security, HOA fees, and the garage bay without pitching. I asked about noise. She shrugged and said most folks liked quiet. I liked the honesty. I put a deposit down before I could think my way into hesitation, signed the lease-to-own paperwork with a move-in tied to my closing date, and photographed each page before it slid across the desk. Outside, I sat in the car longer than I needed, watching a woman walk her small white dog along the sidewalk with the slow confidence of someone who knows all the cracks and whose neighbors carry grocery bags for each other when they must. On the way home, I stopped at a lumber yard that still smelled like trees. I bought oak boards and a small bottle of glue and arranged for a cut list that would make a shadow box with room for light to breathe around the locket. The man at the counter asked what I was building, and I answered in a single line. He nodded like men do when they understand a thing without needing it named twice. Back at the house, I sent Rowan a courteous note confirming the inspection time and my availability to accommodate. I sent the buyers a short professional email as well. I would stay out of the way and keep the utilities steady for their checks. To the 3 neighbors who had written kind words, I replied with a single sentence, "Everything is proceeding by the book," and attached nothing. The story didn't need fresh fuel, it needed fresh silence. Then I broke the last of the wires that let noise in. I changed my number, saved only Lane, Rowan, my doctor, and the building office as favorites, and set the rest of the world to voicemail. In the Maple Project folder, I saved screenshots of the worst of Kyler's posts and logged the time I deleted my old accounts. The camera in the lamp kept doing its job without my attention. I exhaled a little easier. Packing S7 through S9 took the afternoon. S7 got the medical files and a thin folder of warranty papers I couldn't throw away. S8 got framed photographs, among them one from our 25th anniversary where Marion's hair clipped light the way frost does along railings at dawn. S9 got her railroad books, edges soft from hands that read slowly. I wrote each label twice and stacked the boxes in a neat seam along the wall. When I finished, I took the birthday card from my desk drawer and put it in my shirt pocket, where it pressed a small rectangle against my chest like a promise. Emails arrived in a clump around dusk. Lane's assistant confirmed the hearing date and listed what to bring: clips, logs, certified mail receipts. Rowan reported the inspection passed with notes on aging appliances that still behaved themselves. I printed both messages and ticked 2 boxes on the page that used to terrify me. The squares looked less like hurdles and more like a rhythm now. The next morning, I drove back to Wauwatosa to stand in the empty unit again. The leasing agent met me at the door and let me wander. I carried the USB-marked Maple in my pocket and imagined the desk where I'd keep it, the way I'd label the new folders, the chair I'd sit in to listen to the old recording of Marion's call to Lane when I was ready. I measured the west wall and wrote "shadow box eye height" in the notebook. I opened the balcony door and listened to passing traffic till it blurred into a kind of river, different than the Menominee but honest in its own way. On my way down, I noticed a room with a table scarred by card games and a flyer about Thursday chess. I didn't take one. I just made a note. Thursday, try. That night, back by the river, the house didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a job site in its last week. checklists on clipboards, labeled bundles waiting for a truck, the sustained calm of completion. I set the locket on the desk and clicked the catch, not to open it, but to remind myself that even beautiful things can hold instructions. In the notebook, I wrote a single line, "Move day, sun on west wall." Then I closed it and stood at the window until the streetlights came on and the river spoke its steady peace. When I finally lay down, I kept the USB and Marion's letter in the pocket of my robe like a boy with treasures. It wasn't nostalgia, it was ballast. I had found a rhythm that let me sleep without listening for footsteps in the hall. The next chapters would still have courtrooms and signatures, but my life had already followed the fourth column into a room with a west wall that knew afternoon. 2 weeks stretched and thinned until the day arrived with the clean click of a latch. In court, Lane stood with her accordion folder open like a small stage. The judge's bench looked colder than before, or maybe I was finally cool enough to see it clearly. Lane spoke our story in numbers and clips, dates of notices, the certified mail receipts, the shove caught by the lamp. The guardianship draft died without ceremony, dismissed for what it was. The judge gathered the pages, squared them with a fingertip. 30 days to vacate, she said to the other table. If you're not out by then, the sheriff will execute. Her gaze found me and held a second. Mr. Lane, keep your distance and keep your records. I wrote the case number and time in my book. The sound of my pen on paper was steady, which felt like victory. They waited until the final evening to move. From my closed study, I heard the choreography of late resolve. Boxes dragged in straight lines, the hollow drum of a dresser against a door frame, a faucet left running a beat too long. I did not help. When quiet settled, I walked room to room with the phone like a calm inspector. A gouge on the living room floor, a cabinet door hanging 2 degrees off square, a fist-sized crescent in the drywall behind the bedroom door. I photographed each with the timestamp visible and wrote, "Recorded, no claim." It wasn't magnanimity, it was relief. I didn't need their repairs to confirm what I already knew. In the kitchen, I rested my palm on the counter where Marion used to set a second cup without asking. The river lifted through the screen in even breaths. At the front closet, I touched the door jamb the way some people touch a headstone, fingertips, then the flat of the hand. I put her birthday card in my shirt pocket, pressed the locket against my chest, and told the air, "We're good." It wasn't a prayer. It was an audit, closed. At the title company, neutrality dressed itself as carpet and coffee. A stack of documents waited in colored tabs. Rowan nodded once, a tradesman's benediction. The buyers, 2 teachers with quiet shoulders, sat across from me with a folder full of grown-up hope. We signed in sequence, deed, settlement statement, affidavit, that I had told the truth and would keep telling it. The title officer slid me a bank check. The number didn't feel like a prize, it felt like the shape of a decision. The young woman passed an envelope with steady hands. "Just a note," she said. Later I would read it in my own kitchen and find the line, "We promised to fill the place with the kind of noise a house should have." The movers were small and fast, practiced at making weight look like nothing. Boxes S1 through S9 marched into the truck. I followed in the Ford, the locket warm in the hollow above my heart. At Wauwatosa, the elevator hummed without drama. The new unit smelled faintly of fresh paint and maple sap after rain. I set the Shadowbox hardware on the west wall and found the studs by ear, tapping until the sound turned solid. The oak frame went up square on the first try. The locket took its place with a click. I set Marion's card on the small shelf beneath it. The afternoon light slid across the gold and held there like something arriving exactly on time. I wrote 2 short emails at the narrow kitchen counter. "All set," I told Rowan, attaching a photo of the Shadowbox and the view of the maples. "Thank you for precision." To Lane, the same subject, a different attachment, the scan of the closing statement and a screenshot from the lender confirming the fraud hold on the title loan remained in place. Process continues, she replied within minutes. Rest. Unfinished lines asked for their ends. I returned the cable equipment, closed the utility accounts with the same care I had used to open them long ago, and set my phone to allow only the 4 names that mattered now. Mr. Chin texted a photograph that made my throat feel new, the young couple in my old yard planting a sapling. House has laughter, he wrote. I typed back, that's all I wanted. A knock sounded at my new door. A man the color of a winter field stood with 2 mugs and a half smile. Thursday chess downstairs, he said. We've got a board short. I let the door open wider. I'll bring the clock, I told him. It wasn't bravado. It was agreement. Evening set like a well-hung door. I brewed tea and opened the folder that held the USB marked Maple and Marion's letter. I plugged the drive in and sat while the oldest of new sounds filled the room. Her voice speaking to Lane in that careful cadence she used when stakes were high. She named her worry without drama, laid out the steps she hoped I'd follow, and said the word protect as if it were a verb with corners you could build against. I listened to the end and then to the quiet that followed the end. In the yellow notebook I wrote, closing complete. Home is now a verb. I walked out to the balcony with the mug and leaned on the rail. The maples on the street below took the last light like a benediction. Somewhere in the building a door closed softly. Somewhere down the block, someone laughed the way friends do when they're not performing for anyone. Inside, a small draft lifted the corner of Marion's card and let it fall again. The shadow box held its patch of afternoon, now gone to amber. Gold answered gold. I don't ask the past to give itself back to me. It had duties of its own. I keep my promise to it instead. To stand where I am, to write what happens, to choose the kind of quiet that lets me hear a river even when there isn't one, and to leave behind rooms that can carry laughter without apology. The locket gleamed on its small square of wall, steady as a signal. I stood there until the light went soft enough to close the day, and then I did without hurry, with my back straight, and the work finished. Afternoon settled differently here. The Menominee's iron shimmer has been traded for the soft sift of wind through maples and the distant wash of cars taking their time. I keep the apartment at a quiet hum, clock ticking, kettle sighing, the small rasp of a pencil across my yellow notebook. Each day finds its rails. I walk the halls in the morning, nodding to the same faces, and in the light that leans westward, I dust the shadow box and check the screws as if care itself were a fastening. When the sun edges the frame, the locket answers with a patient glow, and Marion's birthday card waits beneath it like a footnote that says, enough. The world I'm building prefers tools to speeches. The ledger sits close at hand, not because I need it now, but because its neat columns remind me what steadiness looks like on paper. If I open the window, the maple leaves speak in a tongue I recognize, river talk translated into air. In that language, I hear the first lesson clearly. Do not try to argue with water or with people bent on taking. Record, repair, reroute. There were months when I felt like a guest in my own life, walking heel to toe along the edge of rooms claimed by other names. I don't live there anymore. The line I kept trying to draw in conversation took shape when I moved it to paper. Stamps, signatures, times, and footage. That was the second lesson. Choose process over noise. Evidence doesn't clap back, it endures. And the third, reduce the prize. When I sold the house, the fight shrank to its true size. The quiet afterward was not empty, it was breathable. I keep a small list taped inside the hall closet for the man I might be on a worse day. Review beneficiaries, verify powers of attorney, photograph receipts, know the recording laws, store everything twice. It's not a manifesto, it's a wrench set. People my age ask for advice as if there were a sermon to preach. I have none. I have steps. Write the truth down. Put your back straight. Let the paper carry some of the weight your voice shouldn't have to. Every so often, I open the folder named SM Proof and scroll through screenshots like a wall that kept a storm out. The notifications have gone to 0, an honest number. Mr. Chin's message arrived last week with a photo of the new couple planting a sapling where the patch of grass never cooperated. "Roots are taking," he wrote. I saved it next to the inspection receipt and closed the lid, feeling something return I hadn't realized was missing: my shape in the eyes of a neighborhood. On Thursdays, I walk downstairs to the community room with a travel mug and a small clock. The first night, the man who invited me tapped the board and said, "Quiet moves are the ones that stick." I answered, "Then I've been practicing." Now we play a best of 3 that stretches into stories. A bridge his wife used to cross, a son who teaches in Racine, my years on the road with open windows and AM radio. We leave with the same number of words we came with and more room around them. In the corner of the living room, I've set a narrow bench and a vise. The oak box I'm building is plain and exact, dovetails fit to the grain like a sentence that can't be argued with. It will be a gift to myself and to whoever comes next, an empty box meant for things that deserve keeping. I've already carved a small line inside the lip where only careful fingers will find it. Home is a verb, not a place, not a prize, a thing you do on purpose. When the glue dries, I'll slide a single sheet into the bottom, a letter to future me, the one who might someday forget what he already knows. 5 lines, no drama. If they demand, measure. If they shout, write. If they flatter, verify. If they claim guardianship, call Lane. If you feel small, make a list. I'll add the 3 essential numbers: attorney, doctor, building office, and date the page because days deserve names. Sometimes near sunset, I take the USB marked maple from the drawer and lay it in my palm like a coin given for fair. I copied its recording into a folder called Kept Promises. I listen without rewinding. Marion's voice carries authority the way a well-built bridge carries weight, without complaint. "Protect," she says in that steady cadence, and I hear the verb as a structure, not a mood. When the file ends, I don't ask for more. I tell the locket what I tell myself. I kept the map. This life has fewer edges and more corners. I sweep them. I oil the hinges. I make tea in cups that don't deserve a pedestal. On the balcony, I lean into the railing and learn the new river's rhythm. Tires droning low, a bus sighing, the neighbors laugh at something not meant for staging. A breeze lifts the edge of Marion's card and lets it fall again, a small nod. The shadow box brightens as the day tips, gold answering gold until the light remembers its next appointment. It would be satisfying to declare victory, but I don't believe in courts that stamp endings. There are only crossings and the proof that you made them with your name legible. I don't try to reclaim the past. It did its work. I honor it by choosing the quiet that lets the future speak, by setting the record straight and then setting it down. When I turn off the lamp, the locket keeps a little of the sun as if warmth were a kind of clause you could add to a will. I stand in that dim glow, not brave, not triumphant, just upright, and that is enough. Tomorrow I'll sand the oak once more, set the letter in place, and press the lid until the seam disappears. I will play chess and lose a game I should have won, then win one I barely deserved. I will write one line in the notebook that says nothing grand, only today's date and the word clear. And when the west wall takes its shine, I'll sit in the chair that fits me and let the new river speak until I can hear it say what the old one said the whole time. Go on. When a door finally closes, it doesn't thunder. It settles. In the quiet that follows, the shape of a life appears. Clear boundaries, earned peace, and the steady proof that paper can do what anger never could. Home becomes less about walls and more about choices repeated with care. Writing the truth down, moving the prize out of reach, letting process carry the weight. Dignity is not loud, it's legible. Freedom isn't a shout in a hallway, it's a signature that points forward. And healing is the patient habit of tending smaller rooms. A west wall of light, a box built to hold what matters, a calendar that marks days by clarity instead of conflict. The past is honored, not reclaimed. The future, finally, has enough silence to speak. Before you go, we'd love to hear what stayed with you. Which moment rang true, and what lesson will you carry forward? Share your thoughts in the comments so others can learn from your perspective. If these stories speak to you, tap subscribe and turn on notifications. New episodes arrive each week. Thank you for watching. Your voice helps others feel less alone. Join us as we continue exploring resilience, justice, and healing. Stay tuned for more true-to-life journeys that honor quiet courage and clear boundaries.